we come up with targets,
Okay.
the right targets, or our customers actually come up with targets. If you manipulate this gene, you get a plant that sips instead of gulps water.
Okay.
You get a plant that can grow in sand instead of soil.
Oh,
You
wow.
really like open up the world to amazing biotech, amazing agriculture, and stuff like that.
All right, well, we are wrapping things up here at the Art of Alcohol with Venture Cafe. I am your host, Nick Niehaus. This is a version, at least, of Bourbon Friday. I'm talking to Massimo from KWS, and we're going to talk about some science at the end of a night of drinking.
Right
so I'm
on.
hoping I can understand it. So, Massimo, you guys do some pretty interesting gene editing, right?
Yeah, we're really at the tip of the spear here.
Okay.
We're a big company, an old company called KWS. We're
All right.
a seed company. Ultimately, our product is bags of seed for farmers. But behind that bag of seed is a lot of like very cool stuff that happens. Breeding,
bet.
biotech, gene editing, stuff like that. And that's what we deal with here in St. Louis.
Well, that's a lot to unpackage there. Some fascinating stuff. Talk to me about like kind of where does this process start, right? So you're trying to edit a plant. You're trying to edit the genome, the DNA.
Yeah.
Do you start with like a target? Are you trying to accomplish something, or do you experiment? How does that process
you
work?
put it so beautifully. Based on a lot of experiments, physiological experiments, we come up with targets,
Okay.
The right targets, or our customers actually come up with targets. If you manipulate this gene, you get a plant that sips instead of gulps water.
Okay.
You get a plant that can grow in sand instead of soil.
Oh,
You
wow.
really like open up the world to amazing biotech, amazing agriculture, and stuff like that. And we here in St. Louis provide the technology that drives that and that makes it happen.
Interesting. Okay.
Amazing.
So when you say you provide the technology that drives that, tell me a little bit more about that. What does that look like? What kind of tech
Well,
are you providing? Yeah.
It's called gene editing. Here in St. Louis, that's what we focus on in corn. So
Okay.
to that end, there's a molecular division. They make the gene editing components that make these cuts, these edits in the genome. And then my component, where I work personally, is the cell biology component. So we get that into a plant cell, and we make plants regenerate from these cells, these single cells, with these qualities in them that make farmers happy, basically.
Sure.
We make plants that grow with less water, that can make more seed, more bang for their buck. It's amazing.
Yeah, that is
and so basically we're taking breeding, that's always happened for thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, and we accelerate that. And we make it worth their while, this bag of seed that they buy, that they grow, to buy that seed.
Well, it's amazing to think that you have what you've experienced as a farmer for many years, and you say, I want to accomplish something that advances the plants I'm growing, and then you just buy a new bag of seed and it happens, right? So I think I want to ask you about this. A little bit controversial for certain people, right? So we talk about like GMO, and it's such a scary thing.
Yeah.
But on the other side, from the scientific standpoint, a lot of times you're just accelerating a process farmers were already doing, right? I mean, they're taking certain plants and they're trying to breed them together in a way that was producing certain outcomes. So tell me a little bit about how much has this accelerated that process? So, maybe 50, 100 years ago, when farmers were trying to do this stuff, how much quicker can you accomplish it now?
Well, it's accelerated it tremendously.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
In breeding, what it used to take a generation to do, we can do in a year now. So that's
Really?
incredible.
Wow. Okay.
On the other hand, I recognize the fact, and I don't want to downplay this, because this whole debate about GMs and things like that is rooted in a real fundamental thing about what we feed our kids, what we ingest ourselves.
Yeah.
And we don't want bad stuff. And so the reality is that the industrial food system, what we eat, like high fructose corn syrup and things like that, are bad for us. And GMs and GE crops kind of contribute to that, right?
Okay.
So at the end of the day, we want to make things that are better for farmers, that make food cheaper for all of us to eat.
Well, of course,
At the same time, we each individually want to be healthy.
Yeah.
You work out, probably. I work out. We want to eat the right things. We want to make sure we're ingesting the right things. We want to make sure our kids eat things that are the best for their futures as well. And it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm seeing, particularly this day and age, with Donald Trump in the presidency. It's very polarized.
Yeah.
You're either on this side and you hate everything that side does, or you're on that side, you hate everything this side does. It's terrible.
Right.
And we should get to this point where we kind of acknowledge the complexity of the situation as scientists.
Well, yeah, because I mean, it's interesting to talk about, from one side, GMO, anti-GMO, whatever, but then those same people are often like environmentalists, right? And they want to like reduce how much water we use, right? And you're talking about accomplishing that with the plants, right? So I mean, obviously there's a lot of like improvements. So tell us about some of the improvements you've been able to make by being able to do some of this gene editing.
Gene editing is the most amazing thing. It takes everything we can do that we did previously with GM or genetically modified crops and accelerates it, right?
Okay.
So we can take things that are very important to farmers, like making more bang for your buck.
Of course,
You plant one seed, you get more yield from that, one way or another, whether it's making plants grow with less inputs or making plants grow with the same inputs but more outputs. At the end of the day, farmers are smart people.
Of course,
they're not going to invest in something that doesn't provide more bang for their buck. So that's essentially our business model, right? And so basically what they provide makes the world a better place in the sense that we make cheaper food.
Yeah.
And when you think about the fact that in the society we live, you can actually get, obesity is a problem for poor people these days.
Yeah.
Now this does not mean that like we're where we need to be at this moment, right?
Yeah.
But the fact that for however millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years of civilization, starvation has been a problem, and now the poorest people suffer from obesity means we've gotten to a step change that like we're addressing a completely different problem.
Sure.
And we need to address this problem, but the fact is we've gotten to a point where a very small percentage of the population can provide all the food that we all need.
True,
we can just go to Schnucks or Deerberg's here in St. Louis and get everything we need for a very small fraction of our salary.
Because it used to require a lot more labor
let's
to
not
make
forget.
all this food.
Exactly, let's not forget.
And I think I have a guy that I went to in school, he's a biochemist, and he talks about this a lot. I see a lot of his posts on Facebook, and he talks about this, which is like, we're only changing one gene versus when we were crossbreeding plants, we're changing who knows how many
it's more
genes.
predictable.
Yeah.
But I really want to be clear about this because I don't think that talks about enough.
Yeah.
In my community, the scientists, it's kind of the opposite of what we see in like the other community on Facebook and things like that, or that's what I see, where it's like these idiots, they don't know what they're talking about, these assholes, they're like working for corporate science. I think there's a middle ground where we want the best for our kids. We want to make sure what we ingest in our own bodies, what we put in our kids' bodies, are the best that we have to offer. And I don't think that gets communicated enough, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
And I really wish we could all turn down the volume a little bit and just talk about it. Talk about the science, talk about, what's really good for us, what corresponds with our, decisions about health and things like that.
Of course,
And understand that, there's a food system in place that's not very healthy. And, what we sell to farmers is good for them, it's good for us, but we need to keep that into consideration too.
Well, and it's also about like what happens after the farmers grow the food, right? Because a lot of what's making us unhealthy is how we then turn that food into things that are super concentrated and aren't necessarily good for our bodies.
That's so important.
Yeah.
My philosophy on that, a Twinkie is shit, no matter whether it's organic.
Give me organic drink, it's still bad for you, right?
The food scientists have it worked out. Whether you put X amount of organic sugar into it or X amount of genetically modified high fructose corn syrup, it's shit, right? But we all know, we intrinsically know this, that it's shit. And we also know you need to have a little bit more protein than carbs and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's not necessarily compatible with the food system. So even though I make a product that ultimately ends up in a bag of seed, and that bag of seed ends up in the industrial food system, what we see when we fly over the US from New York to LA, and we see like for 2 hours of that flight, this system, it's not good for our health. It's not good for our pot bellies necessarily. But number one, it's important that we have solved the problem of starvation. And number two, we're at the next level that we need to figure out how to like take all these excess calories and channel them the right way. Is that so bad?
No, I think that's a great point. That's like, evolution of a species is about addressing one problem at a time, right? So we are addressing, hey, wow, now we all, at least in this country, have access to a ton of food. that's a great,
Yeah.
we're exporting a ton of food, right? Like we're
Exactly.
feeding the rest of
And
the
we
world.
just haven't adapted fast
Yeah.
enough
Yeah,
because
so
of
how do we-
this thing.
Yeah,
We haven't
exactly. This
adapted
thing,
fast
right?
enough to having.
Well,
the
he's got
surplus
less of
and-
one than we do.
Well,
but,
you know.
I'm working on it, but it's a struggle, brothers. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, the
'Cause
bottom
we have
line is
the
like
surplus.
we need
Exactly,
to have
yeah.
the respect, because I see this in the vaccine debate too. That's a lot more polarized and it's a lot more obvious, but at the same time, I feel like there's something happening with all of us these days, this day and age, where we are forced to pick sides almost like it's a sports
no,
team.
it's terrible,
And
yeah.
it's like, if I'm on this team, I have to hate this team.
Yep.
And I have to reject all your arguments and I can't listen to you. And I really want to drive a movement where we just eliminate that, eradicate that, and just understand the science. Because at the end of the day, as a scientist, I have to face the facts, and the facts are based on data. And if the data doesn't support my pet theory, every day at work, I really want this to happen because it's good for my career.
Right,
it's good,
yeah.
it's very cool, whatever. If it doesn't support it, I have to swallow it and say, okay, friends, this is fine. We move on to the next thing.
As a
How
scientist,
can we
you
get
have to
to
be
that?
willing to be wrong, right?
Yeah. And what do you think? How can we get to that as when we debate this in the media?
I mean, even my background is in science. You have to test the fact that you're wrong.
Yeah.
You're going for wrong
Yeah.
to prove that you're right.
Yeah.
You know?
And,
Well, that's a good point. If we could all try to prove ourselves wrong first, right? Seek to understand the other side, we'd really improve as a society, I think. So.
I think so.
Well, that's great. That's a great message to end the night on,
Yeah.
right there, right? It's try to understand each other first before you try to prove your own point, right?
Indeed.
Be a scientist about your conversation.
Let's understand
Yeah.
each other.
All right. Well,
And have some
Massimo,
good
thank you
wisdom.
so much for joining us.
It's a real pleasure to be
Cheers.
here.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks for watching. We truly hope you enjoyed it. Please like and share this episode, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. It really helps us out. To stay up to date, follow us on social. We are at Bourbon Fridays on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok. See you next time.